Hi, welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we are up to chapter 19. I can't wait. Let's get right into it. Okay. On the afternoon before the dinner, a knock came at Talyn's door just as she was getting out of a cold bath. Afternoon drill had been particularly exhausting in the thick Mithranar humidity. By the time she'd thrown on a robe and gone to answer the door, whoever it was had gone, leaving behind a bulky package wrapped in paper resting against the outside of her door. She picked it up and kicked the door shut behind her. Her fingers made quick work of the ties, and the paper fell open to reveal 3 sets of clothing. The new uniforms. Curious despite herself, she spread them out on her bed. A training uniform, general duties attire, and a formal set. Her wing, the wolves now, had chosen charcoal grey and white for their colours. She liked the choice. The uniforms were beautiful, made by a skilled hand and from the finest cloth. Designed for the humid environment, the training uniform consisted only of a sleeveless cotton shirt in light grey and pants made from the same cotton in darker grey. Loose, but only falling to just below the knees where the fabric gathered in around the calves. Right at the bottom of the package were a pair of black leather sandals, hardy and well made, but light. A dry chuckle escaped her. Her wing would be nice and cool in these, but good luck to them when they fell hard during training or their sparring partner got through their guard. Bruises and cuts would be a regular occurrence. The general use for when they were on duty and formal sets were less weather appropriate. These included a sleeveless charcoal leather vest that fell halfway to the knees with a split down the front for ease of movement. Underneath the vest was a long-sleeved white cotton shirt. The breeches were fitted but made from soft white cotton. The formal set had silver embroidery stitched into the outside of the legs and around the edges of the tunic. In the same package was a beautifully tooled weapons belt. A pair of matching boots in charcoal complemented the set, made from supple leather that laced to mid-calf. Neither of the tunics or the shirt of the training uniform had a sigil. The chests of each were bare. She'd seen the Acondor sigil on the falcons plenty of times now, golden wings sprouting from a golden crown, but was unsurprised the wolves had chosen not to wear that. However, a small image of a snarling wolf had been stitched out in dark blue thread on the bottom left corner of each tunic. Shaking her head, Talyn folded all the clothes back up and put them away in the bottom of her chest. Instead, she unpacked her formal King Shield uniform from the bag sitting on the chair by the end of her bed. She polished her boots and laced them up over black breeches, firmly ignoring how the layers instantly made her uncomfortably hot. Next, she polished her sides until they shone. Finally, she braided her long black hair neatly, then traced her fingers gently over the starred emblem in bright amber on her chest. Then she went to find her wing. The wolves were standing in a neat row in the drill yard, awkward in their finery. Even the gruff Theac looked ill at ease, fingering his shirt cuffs and glaring at anyone who so much as glanced at him. Cuinn's tailor had done well, though. The uniforms fitted each of them perfectly, from Halun's huge frame to Corin's too skinny one. Talyn greeted them with a smile. "You look great." Zamrel gave her a sour look. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever worn. How am I supposed to remain inconspicuous in this?" "You're not a thief anymore, Zamrel. You need to stand out. Make it obvious that the prince has protection. It suits you." "Tierslin's the only one who looks good in this absurd get-up," he snapped. "You're just jealous because we look good in clothes," Tierslin retorted airily. Talyn couldn't help but agree. The wingfolk's seemingly universal ethereal beauty made them stand apart from the humans. Their arrogance stemmed from that, and from their magic, she supposed. Tierslin did look gorgeous, the grey and white uniform complementing his brown skin and grey wings perfectly. "I think you look very impressive, Captain," Corin said in his quiet voice. Halun grunted, yanking at his collar. "Can we get going, Captain?" Theac asked. "I feel like a prize fool standing around in this get-up." She shook her head. "No, the falcon wanted us to wait here for him." "Of course he does," Zamrel said. "Humans aren't competent enough to make their own way to places. They need guides." "Zamrel," Theac warned. They fell into awkward silence. Studying them, she quickly realized the other reason they were standing so uncomfortably. They'd begun basic weapons training, centered mainly around sword drills, but none of them were accustomed to carrying weapons yet. Theac didn't seem to notice the axe hanging down his back. He preferred that to a sword in a fight, he told her, and she allowed it. But the other 4 kept shifting to adjust the weight of the swords at their waists. She was glad to see Corin also had 2 knives sheathed in his belt. "When people are watching, you're going to have to stop shifting about like you've got ants crawling up the inside of your legs," she commented. "You'll get used to the weight of those swords quickly." Tierslin flushed red and instantly stilled himself. Cuinn looked startled, as if he hadn't even realized what he was doing. Both Zamril and Halun glared at the ground. They all jumped simultaneously when the gate creaked open. Booted footsteps sounded on the stone, and then Ravnir appeared, resplendent in ringard teal and scarlet, golden sigil gleaming on his chest. "I've come to escort you," he said briskly, looking over them with grudging approval. "Are you ready, Captain?" "Yes, sir," Talyn said, smiling approval at the way the wolves immediately fell into an orderly line behind Theak. At least they'd learned to form a straight line in the past month, if nothing else. Ravnir's eyebrows lifted in what looked like surprise, but he said nothing as he led them away. Night was falling. As the light faded, glowing lamps blinked into existence along the walkways and bridges, and small coloured lights adorned the trees in the scattered gardens. It would be an amazing sight for any ship entering the bay. The artistic way the lights had been designed and placed gave the night a magical glow. It was utterly unlike Dock City at night, where darkness and unease seemed to fill any space, and the few lights struggled in a losing battle against it. The building they were heading for was lit up more than the rest. Ravnir took them through a side entrance that emerged onto an upper balcony looking down over the room below. It was large, almost the size of their training yard, and luxuriously appointed. Sofas, lounges, chairs, and rugs sparsely covered the floor, which was carpeted in a plush lilac. After a quick count, she estimated at least 100 guests, probably more, reclining on backless couches or clustered in small groups, talking. Food covered the tables along the edges of the room, and human servants carried platters of drinks around. Others moved discreetly in and out, replacing whatever was eaten from the tables. The winged folk in the room didn't even seem to notice they were there. "You never noticed the servants at Ryathel Palace when you spent time with your family there either," Sari pointed out. "Yes, but that was—" She struggled to find the word. "Different, yes, but that didn't capture it entirely. Part of it was that when she was with her family, she was completely focused on putting forward a smiling, confident front, so that they would think she was fine. Paying attention to anything else was out of the question. And the rest, well, it was just different in Mithranar. Still, maybe I should have." She focused her attention back on her surroundings. Arched floor-to-ceiling windows allowed light from the setting sun to shine through, and several were open, so that the evening breeze filled the room, redolent with the scent of flowers and wine. "It's just started," Ravnir spoke at her shoulder. "Prince Cuinn will be arriving at any moment. He'll need an escort in." "I know how to run a guard detail, sir," Talyn said firmly. "You can leave us to it." Ravnir nodded, stepping off the balcony and floating down into the room. Talyn turned to see all 5 members of her wing looking at her expectantly. She stifled a smile. Focused attention was a definite improvement on the sneers and attitude from her first few weeks with them. A knot of tension she hadn't realized was there uncoiled slightly. "Talyn, do you know the entrance Prince Cuinn will use?" "Yes, I've been to plenty of these things before," he made a face. "They're so boring. We're not going to have to stand and watch all night, are we?" She gave him a hard look. "You and Theak will escort the prince inside. Once he's inside, your job is to stand guard by the main entrance with the other falcons for the evening. Keep your back straight, don't fidget, and don't leave your post for any reason unless the prince comes under attack." She looked at her second. "You know what to do, Theak." "Aye." He bowed his head, then he and Talyn exited through the door they'd just come through. The winged man gave a long-suffering sigh as he left. Talyn turned to the other 3. "We'll be monitoring the area to make sure it remains secure. Zamril?" The thief had been pulling at the stiff collar around his neck, but when Talyn spoke, he dropped his hands and looked at her. "What?" he snapped, surly. "You can drop the attitude for a start," she said tartly. "I want you to think like a thief. Go outside and study the building. Discover the most likely place for any assassin to get in, then report back to me." "How should I know where an assassin would come in?" "Pretend you wanted to break in here and steal something valuable in the middle of the dinner." She kept her voice sharp. "I'm getting sick of doing this dance with you, Zamril." "I'll do it," he muttered. "Where will I find you when I'm done?" "I'll be here." Zamril slipped out the door, and Talyn turned her attention below, studying the guests. The attention of the entire room shifted to the main doorway when a slim winged woman entered. That, more than the richness of her clothing and the size of her retinue, told Talyn this must be the Queen of Mithranar. Sarana Acondor was a daunting figure, tall and beautiful, her long blonde hair turning silver with age. From so high up, Talyn couldn't see her in much detail, but those closest to her kept darting glances her way, as if awaiting an order and ready to carry it out instantly. The Queen held them in the palm of her hand, yet seemed utterly unaware of it at the same time. A winged man crossed the room to greet the Queen. He was tall also, with a powerful build, dark hair, and ebony wings that glimmered bronze in the glow of dusk. People moved out of the way when he walked, some of them not even seeming to realize what they were doing. "The Prince of Night," Cuinn murmured as he came to her side. Talyn stepped up on her other side, a silent but solid presence. His gaze mirrored hers, scanning the room below. She turned, lifting a questioning eyebrow at Cuinn. "It's what they call Prince Mithranar, the Queen's eldest son," he clarified, then straightened slightly and pointed. "And the second son, Prince Azralan, the Prince of Games." The Prince of Games was slighter, not as tall, but just as dark-haired as his eldest brother. His charcoal wings rustled as he too crossed the room to greet his mother, though he was careful to let Mithranar speak first, and his gaze constantly flicked to his elder brother, just like the Queen's attendants did with her. "Games?" Talyn asked, half distracted by the interplay between the royal family. It was nothing like she was accustomed to. There was no natural ease there, no slight relaxing at being in each other's presence. Instead, there was a watchfulness and a hint of unease. "He's a master at any game you could think of, but particularly cards. It's his favourite pastime," Cuinn shrugged. "At least, that's what I've heard. He probably gets it from his father. The Montani love gambling." "These winged folk do like their ostentation and fancy titles, don't they?" "And the Prince of Song," Cuinn murmured. Talyn straightened a little beside her. Her eyes shifted to where Cuinn was walking through the door, flanked by Theak and Talyn, and surrounded by a gaggle of pretty winged women. Almost as one, his mother and two brothers turned at his entrance, their gaze focusing on him from across the room. Cuinn seemed unaware of their regard. He left his two guards by the door and entered the room with the women. As always, he was impeccably dressed, tonight in an open ivory jacket over a deep violet shirt and pants, tailored to perfectly fit every inch of him. The sandals on his bare feet flashed with some kind of jewellery, as did the cuffs of his shirt. One of his companions, a slim blonde woman with green wings, slipped her arm through his. He flashed her a lazy smile. Talyn scanned the room to see how the attendees responded to Cuinn's entrance. Maybe here she could get a clue of whether he truly faced any danger. There was nothing of note. The women, and not a few of the men, in the room watched him with varying degrees of interest, some more overtly than others. But there were others, those she recognised from the way they carried themselves as probably amongst the high nobility, who completely ignored the youngest prince. Their attention was almost fully occupied by the Queen and the eldest prince. There was nothing there that made her uneasy or raised her suspicions. Ravnir claimed there were no specific threats from outside the citadel. She'd not yet identified any, to Cuinn at least, from the inside. On the surface, it seemed as if the Crown's request for her presence, simply to improve the skill of their wingguard, was all there was to it. Except instead of having her train the wingguard, she'd been tasked to build a new wing for Prince Cuinn's protection. Was Ravnir just testing her skill before letting her train his soldiers, or was there more to it? "I think there's more to it," Sari murmured. "I agree." If that was all there was to it, then how did two Caledon potentials end up in a cell together the day she was choosing soldiers for her wing? She refused to believe that was a coincidence. And there was still the question of why they'd requested a king shield now. Ravnir hadn't provided a satisfactory answer on that score. She turned to Cuinn. Maybe she could start with the rest of the royals. Why such names for the princes? He shrugged. "Prince Mithranar is the most powerful winged folk born in generations. He's got warrior and song magic, and he's known for being a skilled and vicious fighter. Because of that, along with his dark wings and hair, well, I suppose people just thought Prince of Night stuck, and he's never dissuaded it. Prince Azralan loves to play, as I said, and Prince Cuinn, well, he only has song magic, but it's powerful. I've heard that hearing him sing is a once-in-a-lifetime experience." "Sure, that makes sense, but why the names at all?" "Well, the Queen is an only child, so was her father, but now we have 3 princes, only one of whom can become king. Giving them nicknames increased the theatrics of it all, I suppose. Something to entertain them." A loud grunt from Talyn on her other side gave her a solid idea of what he thought of that. She frowned. "Doesn't Prince Mithranar become king?" "That's not how it works here," Cuinn shook his head. "The ruling monarch chooses their heir, along with input from the 5 most powerful noble families. They form what's called the Queen Council." Talyn turned back to the room below, eyes falling on Cuinn. Maybe that was the answer she'd been looking for. She'd just assumed there was only a slim chance he'd ever ascend the throne because he was the third-born. His revelation that he was illegitimate had only deepened that assumption. "Of course, nobody truly expects it to be anyone but Prince Mithranar," Cuinn dispelled her new theory a second after it had formed. "He's far and away the most powerful of the 3, and that's traditionally what decides things. From the gossip I've heard in Dock City, the noble families are too afraid of Prince Mithranar to even think about advising the Queen to pick Prince Azralan, and none of them would consider Prince Cuinn. Why? I'm not entirely certain, Captain. Cuinn cocked his head. We humans aren't really privy to the details of royal court machinations, but ask anyone and they'll tell you the same thing. Maybe it's because nobody knows who his father is. The Queen has always refused to name him, and so the assumption is that he wasn't from a strong family. He might not even have been noble. Or maybe it's just because he does nothing but drink and party. A hint of contempt edged Cuinn's tone. Theory ruined, Talyn dismissed her thoughts. It was time to turn her focus back to this event and ensuring Cuinn's security. She was about to send Halun looking for Zamrul. He should have been back by now, when there was movement in the corner of the room. A small group of winged folk were gathering on a raised platform. One of them held a guitar in his hands, and the other a flute. The Queen crossed to her youngest son, taking his arm and murmuring in his ear. Cuinn nodded and disentangled himself from the three women who were sharing a couch with him. As soon as people saw him move towards the musicians, all eyes turned that way. Talyn did a sweep of the guards. They were all looking with anticipation at the same thing, including Talyn. Theak was at his side, scowl firmly in place. Why is everyone so interested in Prince Cuinn all of a sudden? She asked Cuinn and Halun. I don't know. Zamrul chose that moment to reappear, but I overheard the falcons outside talking. It seems like everyone wants to be assigned guard duty for these events when Prince Cuinn is attending. Did you survey the area? She asked. He nodded. There are 4 possible entrances aside from the main one. I'd only use 2 of them. The others are too open and it will be too easy to be spotted trying to sneak in. Take Halun and Cuinn. She glanced at them. You'll keep watch on 1 entrance each. When you've shown them, come back here, Zamrul. I want your eyes. You know what to look out for. What if someone tries to get in the entrance I'm guarding? Cuinn looked startled by her order. Call me, Halun said unexpectedly. I'll help you. She gave the young man a reassuring look. Yell for all you're worth, then remember those knives on your belt and what you can do with them. Aye, Captain. Looking only marginally reassured, Cuinn followed Halun and Zamrul out. The musicians started playing then, breaking into a merry rollicking tune that had Talyn pushing away the impulse to tap her fingers against the railing. The music spread through the open space, cheerful and bright. The chatter of conversation elsewhere in the room faded slowly, and almost everyone edged a little closer to the corner. Once he knew he had the full attention of the room, Cuinn stepped up to the platform and sat behind a beautifully carved and painted harpsichord. His fingers ran lightly over the keys, and then he glanced back to the musicians. Without a word being exchanged, the music they were playing changed, moving into a deep, haunting melody. There was almost a collective intake of breath throughout the room as the audience clearly recognized the music. A hush of anticipation fell over the space. A little smile crossed Cuinn's face, and his fingers began moving on the harpsichord, the instrument's clear sound joining that of the fiddle and flute behind him in perfect harmony. Then he opened his mouth to sing. Talyn had never heard such a voice. She was so entranced by the richness and beauty of it that it took her a few moments to begin paying attention to the lyrics of the song. Long ago in the dusk we came, Mithranar through the cold and rain. Forest dark, horrors untold. The night is full and will test your soul. The night favours only the bold. Cuinn sang the history of the winged folk, of their arrival in Mithranar, how they'd faced the terrors of the forest, how they needed to band together and fight for their right to live in their new home. And as he sang, his music swept through the notes in the music, haunting and melancholy at the words describing their desperate struggle for survival, then soaring into pride and joy as the song spoke of the construction of the citadel, of its beauty and splendour. We remember all those we lost, feathers bright they will not be forgot. Our citadel shines golden and true, for all time, for all time. The Prince of Song. This was his magic. It unfolded like a flower as he sang, enveloping everyone in the room. She felt every single emotional beat of that song, as if each emotion were hers alone, her struggle, her triumph, her pride and fear. As one, dear heart, as one, we fly as one. The wind will guide us home, to glory under the sun, all glory under the sun. Every single guest stood entranced. Most had tears in their eyes, others were holding tightly to each other. All the guards had forgotten their duties, the entirety of their attention on the prince sitting at the harpsichord, eyes closed as he made the most beautiful music Talyn had ever heard. Even Theak was staring, the scowl on his face softened to something like wonder. Cuinn's voice soared into the pinnacle of the song, until its very essence vibrated through the air, almost too powerful to be endured. As it reached its peak, hovering in beautiful melody, something inside Talyn eased. For the very first time in 2 years, her despair ebbed away and the constricting weight of grief on her chest was gone. She took a single, deep breath, shoulders straightening and tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, she felt whole again. Then, slowly and gently, the music faded away and the song was over. A collective sigh echoed through the room. The tendrils of her depression came sinking back through her as she let go of the magic, holding them all. "They say he's the most powerful song mage ever born," Zamrel muttered. "Still, I had no idea." She started as she realized Zamrel standing beside her, mouth open, face entranced. She'd been so engrossed in the song, she hadn't been paying any attention to her surroundings, let alone the room. She flushed hotly and scrubbed at her still wet eyes. Below, Cuinn's gaze shifted, a slight frown on his face. A moment later it landed on her, high above him. The expression in his eyes seemed to indicate concern, rather than the amused contempt that was usually written there, as if he could feel her emotion. Which he probably could. Instantly she straightened, slamming her emotions down deep, and quickly tugging her cool mask and well-practiced self-control. A moment later his gaze shifted away from her, face breaking into a smile as one of his companions came over to murmur something in his ear. "He's not going to sing another one." The disappointment in Zamrel's voice was acute, and Talyn felt an echo of it herself as Cuinn stood up from behind the harpsichord, offered a languid wave to the musicians, then returned to the women he'd been entertaining. "Go and check on Halun and Corin, make sure they've seen nothing of concern," she barked at the thief, the sharpness of her voice covering up her guilt and frustration. Several assassins could have entered the room and gotten all the way to Cuinn without any of them noticing during that song, and once they'd gotten that close, she'd never have reached him in time to save him. Despair slid through her. Her focus had slipped because she'd been overwhelmed by the aching grief that was still so acute. She took in a deep breath. Cuinn was still alive. Nothing had happened. Tomorrow she'd speak to the wolves about losing their focus next time Cuinn sang at one of these events. She'd come up with a strategy to manage how his magic affected them. One step at a time. Whoa, that was a great chapter. End of chapter 19. As always, this is your jumping off point if you want to avoid spoilers from my author commentary. If you are jumping off here, please consider liking and subscribing below. That really helps me out. And I really look forward to seeing you for chapter 20 soon. Otherwise, if you're sticking around, let's jump into some author commentary. Okay, chapter 19. What a chapter. So essentially this chapter is a showcase for Cuinn's powerful song magic. Everything in this chapter leads up to that event, to the dinner that Talyn and the wolves have been told they need to escort Cuinn to. And for Talyn as our protagonist, or one of our two protagonists, to stand there and witness for the first time the sheer depth, power, and beauty of Cuinn's song magic as he gets up to sing for the crowd. And they all know what's coming. They've experienced this before, but Talyn and her human wolves have not. And it's quite the overwhelming experience. And I very much wanted to make the point there that even for a very experienced, very well-trained warrior like Talyn, who spent a year with the King's Shield being drilled in how to be a protective guard, the sheer power of his music and the emotion that he can evoke while he's singing and using his magic is even enough to, when she's not prepared for it, completely overwhelm her ability to do her job. And she's just focused entirely on him. And part of that is the grief, her grief that she feels, and the way his magic can ease that burden and that weight that she's carrying, and that she's just so struck by the beauty of it, essentially, that and then she beats herself up for it immediately afterwards, which is typical Talyn. But yeah, this chapter was essentially there to showcase for the very first time how powerful Cuinn actually is. And everyone writes that off as song magic at this point in the book. Song magic's just to get up and sing nice songs and make people feel things. But as we see, as the books continue, and as you can imagine too, that song magic can be used in many different ways, and it's not always, and can be quite a dangerous thing. But also in this chapter, we got to see a little bit of the politics of Mithranar laid out for Talyn. She got to see the Queen for the first time, Queen Serana, and most importantly, Prince Mithranar. It's our first sighting of the Prince of Night. Big, strong, handsome, powerful man. who the rest of the room clearly moves around, similarly to the Queen. And then Prince Azralan, the Prince of Games, we get to see him too. He's more of a bit player at this point and continues to be more of a bit player, but as we all know, spoiler ahead, he is not the bit player at all, and Mithranar takes the focus and the brunt of a lot of bad stuff that goes on, but really Azralan uses him very effectively to draw that ire and draw that focus and attention while he's kind of operating in the background. Again, like Cuinn has some powerful skills that aren't as overt as perhaps Prince Mithanas's powerful warrior magic, and therefore escapes attention for how dangerous those skills can be. So a really interesting chapter. We also got that fun little bit of the wolves being entirely uncomfortable in their fancy new uniforms and being on guard detail for the first time. Corin's question to Talyn, like, what do you want me to do if someone tries the assassins try to get through the door? Which is a perfectly understandable response and probably the same question I'd be asking. But you can see that they're coming along. They're looking at her with focused attention. They listen, with maybe Zamaral as a tiny exception. They listen to her even when she asks them to do scary things. She's definitely got their buy-in at this point, and that's starting to show itself in little ways. So yeah, a really interesting chapter, this one. I enjoyed it. From a writing perspective, trying to convey the strength and effect that Cuinn's song magic had on those around him at that dinner and at that reception was tricky. I think it landed, but it's hard to convey without actually playing the music or hearing the song to convey the sheer depth and strength there. But yeah, fun chapter to write too. Any questions, as always, please drop them in the comments below. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you are too. Please consider liking and subscribing and clicking on the little bell for notifications. That helps me out a lot. But I look forward to seeing you soon in chapter 20. Have a great day, guys.